So then, welcome to those of you who haven't seen one of my masterclasses before, and welcome back to the people who might have not been bored to tears by the first one, which I did earlier. My name is Paul Nolan, as you might know from the sign and everything else, and I'm going to do a masterclass on sound design. And I'm basically just going to give you an introduction into what my sound design approach really is. And I'm going to effectively split this masterclass into two main kind of parts, really. One of them is going to be very much on a method of sound design that I'm really passionate about, which is using granular audio reprocessing techniques, using a few different plugins, and I'll be using Reactor for that, and another couple of tools and a few different ways of working within Ableton to achieve some very interesting effects that aren't easily achievable by any other means. The other half of this masterclass I want to devote towards combining an approach of sound design with composition, and specifically a type of composition that I like to call generative composition. And what I mean by that is utilising the tools within Ableton to come up with unique sequences and unique melodic parts that will allow you to expand upon the musicality that you already have. Because one of the things that people really seem to struggle with a lot with sound design and also generating ideas around original tracks is around the process of composition. And I'm going to show you some techniques that will allow you to expand upon your repertoire for generating new musical ideas in ways that allow a little bit of randomness, a little bit of controlled chaos to happen as well, which will allow you to capitalise on certain, you could call them happy accidents. So that's going to be a little bit later on. But right now, I'm going to focus predominantly on, as I say, the granular elements of sound design. Now, what I mean by that, starting off, is going to be a couple of different techniques for creating interesting textures around drones. Now, for some of you who may have seen my first masterclass on the techno drum grooves, getting that techno sound from early on in the afternoon, you'll probably be aware that after you get that initial drum groove in place, you need some sort of atmospheric texture to really push things forward and give your track a unique atmosphere and be able to build tension and anticipation for everything else that's going to happen in the track. So in terms of how to go about that, there's a couple of different ways of doing it, and I'm going to introduce you to some fairly unique tools here. And the first among them is going to be, oddly enough, an older, more vintage, quote unquote, more vintage way of working with sound design. And you'll probably see the eagle-eyed amongst you. I'm actually going back to Reactor 5 here, and its reason being is because it's one of the older ensembles. And when I say old, it's like if plugins could have antique status, this would be one of them. Like, it's like a kind of a classic car of granular processing. And I absolutely love it. What it is, I'm just going to switch it on in a moment because it tends to be fairly uncontrollable. It's this thing from the really old Reactor user library. And the way in which I work with this is it effectively allows you to either work with samples that are already loaded in, or I can load my own. And this thing, I've been using this thing for like over a decade, and I'm still not bored of it, which says something, because the possibilities around you creating something and then effectively sampling your own work and then resampling and then adding extra texture to it is quite remarkable. And I've never found anything since this thing, which is known as grade states, which comes with the older versions of Reactor, and it does work in Reactor 6 as well. If you can get hold of it, hold of the ensemble, it's like a free thing. But it's an absolutely phenomenal tool. And to break down the actual interface here for a second, on the top you can actually see something called a grain cloud, and you can see the sample here. And if I was to, say for example, start to move this target around, especially if I hit play, in fact let me just hit play there, and you just hear it starting to drone away in the background. Now the interesting thing about this is it actually, if you just leave it, it'll just drone on like that forever. So there's no like playing it with MIDI keyboards or anything. I mean, you can play it with keyboard, but I quite like the random elements of it. And if I insert something like this into a track, I tend to either record it out into a separate audio clip, or I'll control the transitions in and out of this drone using things like filters, volume automation, things like that. Because effectively I want it to just sit in the background and just provide this really beautiful colour and real nice texture as it goes around. But it's a bit more complicated than that, because what you can see, you've got 8 of these different kind of crosshairs which you've just seen me move, and it can be used like a step sequencer, where after a certain number of, say, quarter notes or 8th notes or 16th notes, it can move from one part of the sample to another. And you'll see this when I hit play. Now, if I just bring that back on, and you can hear it kind of morphing and going around and making all sorts of very strange and interesting noises. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. And it'll just stay in that position otherwise. Now if I open up the waveform view on Reactor, and again it works exactly the same in 6 as well as 5. If I was to play, I think this is the original one, if I was to play this, have a listen to it. That little beat thing, that's the original sample. So it's unrecognisable right from minute 1, right? So it allows you to just absolutely do something that I love to do as a sound designer, which is just absolutely destroy things. Just put it through the mincer, the grinder, just absolutely smash the living shit out of it. I mean, that's kind of what I live for, right? You know, it's funny that, you know, in this age of like endless digital clarity, I spend most of my time fucking shit up and like making it sound deliberately bad in order to make it sound good. You know, the irony of it, right? So the thing is, I can control this and I can do various different interesting bits with it. So even if I was to just let it drone on like this, I've got various controls here. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to see, but I can turn the level of it up and I can control where in the sample, and you can see these little crosshairs moving. So say for example, that's a really nice little sweet spot that I've found. Now to explain, because it just, you know, drones on in the background, to explain what's going on here, the little green line at the top is effectively the starting point of where it's playing the sample back. If you don't understand granular processing in audio like this, effectively what it's doing, it's taking an audio file, which you've heard the original version of, and it's essentially taking each individual sample, which is, in this case, it would be 44,100 samples per second, 44.1 kilohertz, and it will then reorder it in a random fashion in order to create a new texture, a new whole. So it's really, really interesting, and it's very, even though this particular plugin is quite old, it's still one of the ways you get a very cutting edge sound. And again, a lot of sound designers in the other part of how I work when I do work for films and television and those types of things as a composer and sound designer, it's very interesting. So you get these textures, and you'll hear this quite a lot, and they're layered quite well. But one of the things I will do is actually record this as just a long section, as I've just said, and then we can start to really, really screw with it. But prior to that, I'm going to try and get a bit of a sweet spot going, and I can try and change the pitch and change the timbre of it a little bit and be able to work with it in a really interesting way. And one of the ways I can do that is I can change the transposition. So dropping that an octave, that's just almost like a perfect techno drone right there. And again, because it's going to skip about quite a lot, one of the things I really like to do is that I quite like to use Reactor's audio recorder. So again, if I just turn that off for a second, this is one of those underrated tools in Reactor. And yeah, you can route internally within Ableton, it's quite an easy thing to do. But I quite like to use this as well, where I can just hit record. And what you find when you experiment quite wildly, I used the term in the last masterclass that I gave a few hours ago, having a competition with yourself to make the weirdest noise. And there's things that happen as you're doing random things and moving from one ensemble or one plugin to another in things like Reactor, which will never be repeated. And the amount of times I've been sat in the studio where I've had a sound design day where I do nothing but, you know, play around with stuff like this to see what I can come up with. And I'm not putting pressure on myself to try and constantly be writing and finishing tracks. It's amazing the amount of times that this will skip from one preset to another in Reactor, and it will make this unbelievable noise, and then it's gone forever. And it's like, shit, like I wish I captured that. But if you have this rolling in the background, then that can really be capturing everything in one long audio file, which then means you can almost sample your own like wild experiments. So that's a really nice way of doing it. Now that's one way of doing it within Reactor if you're staying within Reactor. Another way of doing it is I use a little, it'd be great if I could spell in front of people. I use something called audio hijack. And this can be really, really nice because what I can actually do is take the system audio of everything that the laptop in this case is kicking out, and I can record it to an audio file. So it means effectively the entire internet becomes one giant sample library for me to just mine. So in this case, I'm going to sample my own thing, and then we'll get into how we do some interesting things with this as well. So if I just hit record there, and again, you can see that recording in the background, and then if I just hit this, you can see it registering on audio hijack at the bottom. And I'll just record a few different passes of that, or a few seconds of that, half a minute. And turn that off again. And then I can just go to that recording, open that out in the Finder. Hopefully this works, as it's only trial mode. But just play that. There you go. So I've now got that captured. So I can then take this recording and then just drop it straight into an audio channel like this. Okay? Now if I just take that away, drop in here. So you can see I've got quite a kind of a low signal here. And again, I could just use this almost as like a loop. So I can take a section between say bar 5 and 9 here and effectively just loop that around constantly. And then I can do other things to it. I could maybe, again, call upon our friend Nicky Romero with the Kickstart plugin to give it a little bit of sidechain. And again, if I was to bed that in next to this little techno kit that I've made for drums, this is something I always do as well. If I'm not working with a reference track, sometimes I'll work with reference tracks quite deeply. Tomorrow I'm doing the same set of 2 masterclasses, but I'm doing them in a different way. So for the guys who are here tomorrow, I'm gonna do some form of what I call reverse engineering with sound design, which is actually listening to a track and then figuring out backwards how that sound was made and then coming up with something new. But sometimes I like to experiment like this, where it's just completely free, there's no frame of reference, it's just completely, you know, no holds barred. So again, I can put a little sidechain on here, and I always like to, in these sorts of more free experimentations, I want to make sure that the stuff's usable, because, you know, if you're anything like me, sometimes you can get really carried away, and then you wake up the next morning, listen to the sounds you spent all day making, and you're like, Jesus Christ, I had shit in my ears. What was I thinking? Do you know what I mean? Delete. The only problem is I do that in front of people, so everyone remembers. So it's like it's a miracle that I'm still in the job. So if I just hit play here, you'll hear this like little kind of kick drum. Straight away, you know, it works great. So, and even if I was to just activate some of the other notes in the stage in the process is going to get quite interesting, because I'm actually going to start again mangling this even further. So if you think about where we're at, we're now 2 or 3 stages in the, you know, the rabbit hole of just destroying things. So I actually, in recent years, I became really obsessed with warping things in Ableton deliberately badly for creative purposes. Because I don't know about you, mate, you hear like everything warped perfectly and it's really clean and it's really clear, and I just mentally check out within like 8 bars, because it's like it's too perfect. You know, I want to try and leave, or at least put some rough edges on that, you know. I always like to use the term of, I like to take a diamond, like a really clean, perfect diamond of a sample or a sound, and then just rub it with really hard sandpaper, or just like stand on it or something, you know, just to make it a bit more interesting to look at. So I actually like to use the warp modes quite a lot in Ableton, but in completely inappropriate ways that it wasn't designed for. So again, it's a little bit with sound design, it's all about thinking outside the box a little bit, and understanding that there really is no box. I mean, sorry to sound like the little kid from the Matrix, you know, there is no spoon, that kind of thing. Anyway, I've had too much coffee, you can tell, can't you? So, I'm going to go into the warp modes here, and I'm actually going to take the least appropriate warp mode I could think of for this type of material, because it's just a nice ambient drone that's just sloughing along and doing its thing, and I'm going to put it into beat mode, which is supposedly for things like drum loops. Ain't no drums in that, but there are some very interesting effects that you can have on this type of material using beats, and automatically what you'll hear, it's kind of just added some glitchiness. It's not quite steady, and the reason why, the way that the beat mode works, it's actually not doing any time stretching in real time. What it's actually doing is re-slicing the audio, in some cases by transients, sometimes by a note division, but effectively it's slicing it up, very similar to the way, if any of you guys use Reason, the way the Dr. Rex player tends to work, where it slices the loop up into various different chunks and then tries to play it at a new tempo. So I'm going to use that to my advantage, because I'm going to go to preserve transients here, but then I'm going to move it to a 16th note. So it's going to sync those kind of weird glitches to the 16th. And you can almost hear that kind of wavering. And what I'll actually do is I'll take the sidechain off here from the kickstart, so you can hear it a little bit clearer. But we can go further than that. Obviously I could transpose it, I could knock it down by a few semitones, I can do whatever I need to. However, I'm going to go further with the warp mode here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these 3 little arrows that you might be able to see. And one of them here at the bottom is basically, it's going to play the 16th note and it's not going to loop at all. Because when it time stretches like this, what Ableton will try and do is make up for any gaps in the audio by effectively playing the same chunk of audio over and over again. I'm not going to give it the opportunity to do that. I'm going to play it just forward, and this is when it starts to become even more apparent. It starts to really glitch and grain up now. But the great thing is, if I put it on this non-looping transient warp mode on the 16th, this number here, 100, is actually an envelope, meaning it's almost like a fade on each 16th note. So if I was to turn that down from 100 to say 50, we're going to get some really interesting rhythmical opportunities open up in a way that doesn't sound like any other process that I've found so far. You get some really interesting, weird, glitchy gatedness going on. And again, if I start to throw a little bit of sidechain on there, just to switch up the groove a little bit, and then if I just go to a kick only. And that can just sit in the background and really bubble away and do what it needs to do. And again, I can start to play around with the pitch. So what would be quite nice as well is maybe to layer that. Duplicate the track in its entirety, take this clip, up a whole octave. Again, it's just got a little bit of that texture and flavour that would be maybe difficult to get in another fashion. But again, we can go even further with this particular sound, and also as well in general by using some sophisticated send effects. I'm going to introduce you, if you guys don't know about it already, this is pretty much my favourite reverb. It's by Eventide and it's known as the Black Hole. I can't believe I just said it like that. Why did I even say it? Like, that's ridiculous. So, with this particular plugin, it's just got a really, really beautiful sound to it. And the thing about the Eventide stuff is that it can run quite expensive, but obviously we're getting into November, and if you guys know anything about November, it's kind of when plugin developers go crazy with sales and price drops and offers. So, this was actually on offer recently for about 47, 50 euros, something like that. It's normally about 200, so it's well worth picking up. Because again, this is one of those reverbs that gets used on like Hollywood movies, sound design projects, that kind of thing. And it's got phenomenal sound. So to give you an idea, I'll solo this and I'll send it over. It's just got this lovely, real texture to it. And I can use the low and the high. Maybe just take some of the low end out a little bit, make it accentuate the highs a little bit. And that can even be used as a texture on its own. So, let's say for example, I even wanted to use that as a texture. Another method, if you come across a really beautiful sound like this, is to go into the input-output of Ableton. And this might be something you guys might already know, but this is one of my favourite little options for sound design within Ableton. If I open up an audio channel like this, and then I go audio from. I can then select an option called resampling. Now with resampling, what this is going to do is take the sound of whatever is coming through the master channel of Ableton and allow you to record it into a new audio clip, which means effectively you can sample yourself at all times, no matter what's happening. So if I was to, let me just turn my counting off because it's very annoying. If I was to just hit record here, you'll see exactly what I mean. Oops, there we go. So then I can just go back into no input, and again if I play that clip, and again we're into another layer of beats, 16th, maybe just have it really super clicky. Trying different layers with different transpositions. Effectively, you're starting to play chords with this kind of glitchy technique. So again, this is something I do a lot on pads, reverbs that I've printed. I do it a lot on vocals, that kind of thing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful technique, and it's applicable right the way across the board. And I'll use it where I'll also layer this with the original sound, just to give it a little bit of movement and a little bit of, you know, extra texture. Again, one of the guys who I've been privileged to work with in the past, Junkie XL, who is obviously doing incredible things in Hollywood now. When I did some work with him a few years ago, he always said to me, never leave any sound like untouched. Everything's got to be slightly processed or layered to add depth, add tone. So again, always try and go the extra mile with the sounds that you have. Don't settle for just the preset sounds. For me, I look at the preset sounds on synthesizers, or let's say, for example, the sample packs that you can get. I look at them as almost like primary colours of, they're a jumping off point, they're a starting point. And again, where you start to really develop your unique sound as an artist is through experimentations like this and allowing yourself time to really develop a signature sound of your own. That's why a lot of clients, when I work with people, when I mentor people, they'll say to me, like, I'm really struggling to get like an individual unique sound. And then you go in, you look at their Ableton sessions or their Logic sessions, and it's like, yeah, you know why? Because you're just using the same sample packs and presets everybody else is. So really, it's not a problem, because we're all at various stages of our development, and we're all learning all the time. I'm learning every day. And every day is an education in how can I take these sounds on a stage? How can I put my unique stamp on this? So again, moving forward into that, there's another tool that I like to use quite a lot. And this I've been using for the last couple of years. And again, the good news is it's actually quite a cheap solution. And it's called The Mangle, which is suitable, because that's exactly what I do with sounds. I put them through the mangle. And the great thing about this is another one of those really great granular tools, but it's got a beautiful graphical interface that makes it really simple to understand what's going on. And I really like to use the mangle for those almost like stuttery, kind of weird, vocal effects that you hear them in a lot of house and techno records. And you probably think to yourself, like, how the hell hell have we got in that sound? You know, it's a really, really strange thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back into the machine library here, because again, I like to hack the machine library by using the raw samples rather than using the machine interface a lot of the time. But say, for example, it was a little ambient like that, which is really nice. So again, case in point, I'll look at a sound like that, and a lot of people will look at it and go, well, I'll put that on my track, sounds really good, and then kind of leave it. It's like, well, no, this is the start. Like, this is like, for a painter, this is like red, you know, and I'm trying to add all the colours to it, and all the textures, and use it in a unique way. It's a primary tool. So what I'm going to do with this drone here, or this ambience, I'm going to drag it in, and you can see straight away, you've got this really interesting graphical interface. And to just explain what's going on a little bit here, you've got 8 slots, which actually means you've got 8 octaves worth of potential. So that also means you can actually load in 8 octaves worth of samples. So you've got the ability to play polyphonically with different chords. So you could even say, for example, put the same sample in a different slot, play 2 notes in different octaves, they can have slightly different settings, and they can sound completely different and then merge into one sound. So it just allows you to do incredible things. And how I came into this particular plugin was a couple of years ago when I worked on the last Sasha album called Scene Delete, which Sasha's currently doing live shows for. And we were forever taking sounds that had already been produced, doing the resampling thing I've just shown you, and then putting our own sounds back through this, and then either replacing the original sound with the mangled version, or again EQing it and sitting it on top as an extra layer. And we got so much amazing stuff from that, especially when you start to combine things like this. If you guys have got hardware, if you think of the combination of sampling your own hardware, it doesn't have to be big expensive Euro rack stuff, it can be simple little synths like, you know, an Arturia Micro Brute. Again, you can use that, it's all a source, it's all, again, like a primary colour that can be used. So, just to give you an idea about how this works, I can actually play this just using the mouse, because you've got this, again, this crosshair type of situation. It's similar to the Grain Cloud in that you can just select where you want it to play, and it's got a really unique sound. So, you know, you can actually hear it, and you can almost see it as well. With those little green bubbles, it's showing you exactly where it's playing. So if I alter some of the parameters here, specifically release and reverse, you can see it's just playing a longer release, and then if I add in a percentage of reversal, it's got some pretty unique tone to it. But I want to be able to control the rate in a musically useful way. So I can click on rate, and then I can just add in the triplet, straight and dotted notes. And if I put that on like an 8th dotted note, which again is an 8th note plus a 16th note in music theory terms. So if you ever see a D for dotted on an interval like this, add 50%, basically. So, and you can hear it starting to ping off in interesting directions. And it's slowed down a little bit, but if I was to play that alongside our kick, if I just starting point, and we can start to get a lot more complex with the mangle when we start getting into modulation. So let's say, for example, I could set the pitch to, let's say, octaves and fifths, which means it'll start to be musically quite relevant from being able to jump up and down. Because again, I can control the sound and maybe drop the pitch down to like half. So you get that kind of moody, lower end type of stuff that I quite like. But then what I can do is I can then move it around in various different ways. I can actually use it in a major or minor scale as well, which is quite useful. So I can take it, an LFO here, and I could actually just drag it and drop it onto the pitch ratio. So again, I can change the direction of it and the intensity of it to whatever I want. And say, for example, if I play that a little again. So if I was to just play that again. All of a sudden you get into the realm of what was effectively a vocal cut, and you're starting to get into a realm of, well, now it's turning into almost like a riff. And again, I can play that using the computer keyboard. So even if I was to just put in a simple loop, just a 1-bar loop on C0, you'll see exactly what I mean. So then it gives me free hand to to get into some really beautiful, really interesting textures before you even start to, get into the composition phase, and you're just starting from a much more interesting point. So the mangle is well worth investigating, and again, it's a very, very cost-effective way. It's basically just a dude who just built it himself, essentially. It's not like a big company like Native Instruments. So it's quite nice to buy things like this for, 20, 30, 40 euros, because it's really supporting this guy taking this product to the next level. So on top of that, I wanted to kind of go into a little bit of composition, really, and just show you a little bit of an angle on, say, for example, these more rhythmical kind of sounds that we're experimenting with, and be able to kind of come up with something a little bit more custom. So I use the MIDI effects in Ableton quite a lot. So I'll use things like the arpeggiator, I'll use the chord plugin, I'll use, various different things to make my life a lot easier. And I use them in a slightly different way. Because what you'll see is, say for example, I've got a reactor plugin here. Just a nice little, type sound from Monarch. And what you'd normally find with a MIDI effect is that you'll get, someone going like this, and I'll drop an arpeggiator in there and it'll do its thing and it's fine. But I actually like to have the MIDI effects on its own channel. Now the reason for that is because I actually get access to more data. You'll notice the recurring theme about this particular sound design masterclass is all about capture. It's about capturing your musical ideas. In this case, it's about, again, a bit of generative composition, where basically I can capture what this particular arpeggiator, chord, combo is going to do. So again, it's not exactly rocket science, because I can put an arpeggiator on, I can have it do say for example, a random, and then have it on a 16th note, and then effectively, it's not going to play anything, purely because it's on its own channel and it's not going to do anything. However, what I'm going to do on this reactor channel is I'm going to select MIDI from the MIDI effects channel, meaning that when I set the monitor to in and I arm both channels, it's going to receive MIDI data from this arpeggiator. So I'm going to play it here, and it goes mental. And basically it means that I can start to get some interesting data through from the art. Now, it goes a lot further than this, purely because, say for example, if I just shake that sound a little bit more, try not to take up too much time. And obviously it's, it's going kind of mental, but I'm interested in the data, and then I can shape a sound around it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go through various different aspects of what I would do here. And I have the MIDI, so the arpeggiator on here on the MIDI effects channel, and then I'd open the chord up, and I would actually then, say for example, maybe go up an octave. In fact, I'll place that slightly before. And you can already hear there's like some complexity going. And then I'm going to add a randomizer, which is going to make it obviously even more random. So it's going to take the arpeggiated notes, and then it's going to move some of these notes up by up to an octave to give us an even more interesting lyrical flow. But the problem with that is it's set to 32%, so 1/3 of the notes at any given moment is going to go up by anything up to an octave. Might not be in key though. That's a problem. However, if you know what key you're playing in, let's say we're playing in C major, I can add a scale plugin. Now the scale plugin will then effectively quantize any incoming MIDI data in real time to a particular scale. So if I was to set that to C major, you can see the grid change. And now, anything that the randomizer throws up, it's immediately going to say, right, well, that isn't in C major, let's bring that note up or down to the nearest degree in the scale of C major. So it's going to sound a little different. So first, just open up a little bit more here. So obviously it's going crazy, however, what is the key aspect of this is when I hit record. So I'm going to put a little 1-bar count in here. I'm just going to turn that clip down because it's annoying. So if I hit record here, this is why I use MIDI effects on a separate channel. Facebook users are probably looking at a table right now. I'll just pick that up and I'll do that by hand by the end. Too much bass, I'm afraid. So, the reason why, thank you very much, the reason why I'm doing this, and I'm just going to turn the camera over here, brilliant. The reason I'm doing it like this is because basically I now have access to all of the raw MIDI data. So if I was to click fold here on this MIDI clip, you can see all of the myriad of MIDI data that this has just kicked out, which if you put an arpeggiator on a regular channel, you're just going to get a line. You're just going to get one note. Now this allows me, I'm not interested in the entire sequence in this particular case. I'm interested in actually carving little loops and little weird sequences out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to just add in, I'm just going to take smaller loops. So say for example like that little 1 bar loop or 1 beat loop. Which is quite an interesting element for techno, but when it starts to get really interesting is when I move the grid out to 16th notes, and I start using weird divisions to create effectively a polyrhythm. So effectively anything that doesn't conform to, like, you know, 4, 8, 12, 16ths. So I quite like using little sequences like 5 or 7 16th notes, because what it does then is that it cycles around the 4/4 time signature, and it gives you a very, very interesting overall kind of feel. So see, that's totally dancing around now. And I like to be able to select the loop brace here in Ableton, and I like to use shift and the up and down key. Sometimes you find a little straight section. Further shape the sound around it, and I can find a number of different interesting sequences in order to, again, make things much more interesting. So again, this is how you can get hold of the raw MIDI data from any MIDI effects that you might be using within Ableton, and I call this process generative composition, because again, it's been quantized effectively into a loop, into a key I should say, and then you can derive various different loops. And again, we didn't even go into bars 8 to 16, sorry, 9 to 17, because effectively I play a chord there, I play 2 notes, octaves in each other. So again, just to finish off very quickly, I will play this, and again, use that. Say for example, you've got 4, 16, 5, 6, 7. And you get more complexity, obviously, the more notes you play, and you can take it away from there. So, there's a nice little split of 2 different approaches to sound design, with both the more granular elements that we started off with the manual and reactor, and using Ableton's own granular techniques to create some very interesting and very original and unrecognisable sounds from the source material. And then hopefully this generative composition approach will give you a little bit more inspiration and allow you to, you know, add some controlled chaos into your music production techniques. So thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to finish this live video.